What would you do if Kirk Douglas walked out of his own movie premiere because a couple he had never met was turned away at the door? That's exactly what happened at the Egyptian Theater on March 15th, 1962. And 50 years later, that couple revealed why those 5 minutes on the red carpet changed 3 generations of their family forever. It was a Thursday evening in Hollywood. The Egyptian Theater was lit up like a palace. Searchlights swept across the night sky. Photographers lined the red carpet. Hundreds of fans pressed against the barricades, hoping for a glimpse of their favorite stars. Inside the theater, 600 of Hollywood's elite waited in their seats. Studio executives, fellow actors, critics. Everyone who mattered in the film industry had come to see the premiere of Lonely Are the Brave, Kirk Douglas's passion project, a film he had fought for years to make. Kirk arrived in a black limousine at 8:15. He stepped onto the red carpet wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His wife Anne was on his arm, elegant in a silver gown. The cameras flashed, the crowd cheered. Everything was exactly as it should be for Hollywood's biggest star. Then Kirk saw something that stopped him cold. Near the entrance of the theater, away from the cameras, a security guard was blocking a young couple. The man was wearing a neat, dark suit. The woman was in a beautiful blue dress. They were holding tickets, real tickets, and they were black. Kirk watched as the security guard shook his head. He couldn't hear the words, but he could see the body language. The guard's arms crossed, the couple's shoulders slumping. The woman wiping her eyes. Kirk turned to Anne. "Wait here for a moment." He walked away from the photographers, away from the red carpet, away from everything that was supposed to matter on this night. The security guard saw Kirk approaching and straightened up, nervously. "Mr. Douglas," the guard said, "I'm sorry if there's a problem. I was just explaining to these folks that this section is full." Kirk looked at the couple. The man met his eyes with a mixture of hope and resignation. The woman was still fighting back tears. "What are your names?" Kirk asked. The man hesitated. "James, sir. James and Dorothy Williams. We won these tickets in a radio contest. We drove 4 hours from Bakersfield to be here." Kirk nodded. He looked at their tickets. Legitimate tickets for 2 seats in the orchestra section. He turned to the security guard. "These tickets look valid to me." The guard shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Douglas, I was told. The management feels that it might make some of the other guests uncomfortable if—" Kirk held up his hand. "Stop talking." The guard fell silent. Kirk turned back to James and Dorothy Williams. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams, I want to apologize. What's happening here is wrong. It's shameful, and it's not going to stand." Kirk reached into his jacket and pulled out his own tickets. 2 premium seats, front row center, reserved for the star of the film. "Take these," Kirk said, pressing the tickets into James's hand. James stared at the tickets, then at Kirk. "Mr. Douglas, we can't take your seats. This is your premiere. That's exactly why you're going to take them." Kirk's voice was firm, but kind. "Because if this is my premiere, then I get to decide who sits in my seats, and I want you and your wife in the best seats in the house." Dorothy spoke for the first time. "But Mr. Douglas, what about you? Where will you sit?" Kirk smiled. "I'm not going to sit anywhere, Mrs. Williams, because if you can't walk through that front door, then neither can I." James shook his head. "Mr. Douglas, please. We don't want to cause trouble. We'll just go home. It's not worth—" "It is worth it," Kirk interrupted. "It's worth everything. Because if I walk into that theater and pretend this didn't happen, what does that make me? What kind of man watches a good couple get turned away because of the color of their skin and does nothing?" Kirk turned to the security guard. "Here's what's going to happen. Mr. and Mrs. Williams are going to walk through that front door. They're going to sit in the best seats in the theater, and you're going to apologize to them." The guard's face went pale. "Mr. Douglas, the management—" "I don't care about the management." Kirk's voice was ice. "I care about what's right. Now apologize, or I'll make sure every reporter on this carpet knows exactly what happened here tonight." The guard looked around desperately. By now, some of the photographers had noticed that Kirk wasn't on the red carpet anymore. They were starting to drift over, cameras ready. The guard swallowed hard. I'm sorry," he said to James and Dorothy. "Please, go right in." Kirk nodded. "That's better." He walked James and Dorothy to the front entrance himself. The photographers followed, snapping pictures, shouting questions. Kirk ignored them all. At the door, Kirk shook James's hand. "Enjoy the film, Mr. Williams. I hope it's worth the 4-hour drive." James's eyes were wet. "Mr. Douglas, I don't know what to say. Nobody's ever—" "You don't have to say anything." Kirk looked at both of them. "Just promise me something. Promise me that when you have children, you'll tell them about tonight. Not about meeting a movie star, about standing your ground, about knowing your worth, about never letting anyone make you feel like you don't belong." Dorothy was crying openly now. "We promise, Mr. Douglas. We promise." Kirk watched them walk into the theater. Then he turned and walked back toward his limousine. A reporter rushed up to him. "Mr. Douglas, aren't you going to watch your own premiere?" Kirk opened the car door. "Not tonight. But why? What happened?" Kirk looked at the reporter. "Because some things are more important than movies." He got in the car and drove away. The story of what happened at the Egyptian theater spread through Hollywood within hours. The studio was furious. The theater management threatened to sue. Critics who had planned to praise the film suddenly had other things to write about. But the public reaction was different. Letters poured into Kirk's office. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. People from all over the country who had read about what he did and wanted to thank him. Black families who had experienced the same humiliation and never had anyone stand up for them. White families who were ashamed of their own silence and inspired by Kirk's courage. Lonely Are the Brave became one of the most successful films of 1962. Not because of the premiere, but because the story of what happened outside the theater made people want to see what kind of film a man like that would make. But the real story of that night wasn't about box office numbers or critical reviews. The real story was about James and Dorothy Williams. They sat in the front row center of the Egyptian theater that night. They watched the entire film. And when it was over, when the lights came up and the audience applauded, they sat in their seats and wept. Not because of the movie, because of what it meant to be there. James and Dorothy Williams drove back to Bakersfield that night. They never saw Kirk Douglas again, but they never forgot what he did for them. Over the next 50 years, they told the story hundreds of times. To their children, to their grandchildren, to anyone who would listen. In 2012, exactly 50 years after that night, their grandson Marcus Williams was interviewed for a documentary about the civil rights movement. The interviewer asked Marcus about his grandparents' influence on his life. Marcus smiled. "My grandfather used to tell me a story about the night he met Kirk Douglas. He told it so many times I could recite it from memory by the time I was 6 years old." Marcus leaned forward. "My grandparents won tickets to a movie premiere. They drove 4 hours to get there, and when they arrived, they were told they couldn't come in. The section was full. That's what they said. But everyone knew what it really meant." Marcus paused, and then Kirk Douglas walked over, the biggest movie star in the world. He could have ignored them. He could have walked right past and enjoyed his big night. But he didn't. He gave them his own tickets, front row center, and when the security guard tried to protest, Kirk Douglas said something my grandfather never forgot. The interviewer asked what Kirk had said. Marcus's eyes grew wet. He said, "If you can't walk through that front door, then neither can I." And then he left. He walked out of his own premiere so that my grandparents could walk in. Marcus wiped his eyes. My grandfather was a janitor his whole life. My grandmother cleaned houses. They never had much money. They never had much power. But they had that story, and they passed it down to all of us. The interviewer asked how the story had affected Marcus's life. Marcus laughed softly. "I'm a civil rights attorney now. I've spent my whole career fighting for people who get turned away from doors they have every right to walk through. And every time I stand up in court, every time I fight for someone who's been told they don't belong, I think about my grandparents at that premiere. I think about Kirk Douglas giving up his seat so they could have one." Marcus looked directly at the camera. "That's what courage looks like. Not the kind you see in movies. The real kind. The kind where you give up something that matters to you so that someone else can have dignity." Marcus paused. Kirk Douglas probably forgot about that night. It was probably just a few minutes in a long life full of important moments. But for my family, it was everything. 3 generations of Williams have grown up knowing that they matter, that they belong, that someone once stood up for them when it would have been easier to look away. When Kirk Douglas died on February 5th, 2020, Marcus Williams wrote a letter to the family. "Dear Douglas family," the letter read, "You don't know me. But 50 years ago, Kirk Douglas changed my family's life in 5 minutes. He gave my grandparents his seats at a movie premiere because they were turned away for being black. He walked out of his own celebration so they could walk in. My grandparents are gone now, but their story lives on. I'm a civil rights attorney because of what Kirk Douglas did that night. My daughter is studying to be a doctor. My son is a teacher. We are who we are because Kirk Douglas saw my grandparents as human beings worth standing up for. Thank you for sharing him with the world. He was a true hero, not the kind in movies, the real kind. With eternal gratitude, Marcus Williams." And sometimes, if you look closely at the old photographs from Hollywood's golden age, you can still see it. Not the fame, not the awards, but the look in a man's eyes when he chose principle over comfort. Kirk Douglas played tough guys on screen, but off-screen he was tougher. In an industry built on pretending, his courage was the only real thing that lasted. Is there a moment in your life where you wish someone had stood up for you? Or a moment where you stood up for someone else? Hollywood has many secrets, but these are the ones worth telling. If you want to know the real stories, the ones they didn't put in the magazines, you're in the right place. We are peeling back the curtain on the man who never bent. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to Kirk Douglas, the man who never bent. We are just getting started. There are stories about Bert, about Spartacus, and about the moments that defined a legend. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Leave a comment below. What would you have done in Kirk's position? I'll see you in the next video. Never bend.